Did you ever wonder what layers lay beneath the solemn robes of a medieval nun? Private garments did women of faith wear as they devoted their lives within the cloister walls during the 13th century. What secrets of comfort and practicality were hidden from the outside world? Number 7. The under-tunic. The under-tunic, a fundamental garment in the medieval nun's wardrobe, was more than just a simple undergarment. It served as a primary layer of protection and modesty directly beneath the habit. This garment, often referred to as a kirtle or chemise in various regional contexts, was typically the most substantial piece of clothing worn after the innermost chemise. Purpose was practical: to provide warmth, to create a smooth line beneath the outer habit, and to absorb perspiration and body oils, thereby protecting the more valuable or specialized outer layers from frequent soiling. The materials used for the under-tunic varied, but common choices included linen, hemp, or a coarse wool depending on the availability of resources, the climate of the region, and the specific rules of the monastic order. Linen derived from the flax plant was a popular choice for its breathability and absorbency, especially in warmer climates or during the summer months. It was a durable fiber, capable of withstanding the rigors of daily wear and repeated washings, although washing was not as frequent as in modern times. Hemp, a more robust and even coarser fiber, was also utilized, particularly by orders adhering to stricter vows of poverty, as it was often cheaper to produce and cultivate. For colder seasons or in northern climes, wool was a common alternative or addition. This wool would often be undyed, retaining the natural colors of the sheep, ranging from creamy whites to browns and grays. Dyeing cloth was an expensive process, and the natural hues were often seen as a sign of humility and plainness, aligning with monastic ideals. The construction of the under-tunic was generally simple, reflecting the functional and unadorned nature of monastic attire. It featured a loose, straight cut, often extending to the ankles, much like a long, plain dress. The sleeves were typically long and narrow, designed to cover the arms fully and protect them during labor. Necklines were modest, usually a simple round neck or a slit, ensuring no part of the chest was exposed. Seams were often functional rather than decorative, joined with strong, simple stitches that could endure constant movement and the strain of daily tasks. The making of these garments was often a communal effort within the convent. Nuns themselves or lay sisters would spin the yarn, weave the cloth on simple looms, and then cut and sew the pieces by hand. This labor was considered an integral part of monastic life, a form of active devotion and self-sufficiency. Historical accounts suggest that the under-tunic sometimes featured gussets or gores, triangular or wedge-shaped pieces of fabric inserted into seams or under the arms to allow for greater freedom of movement without adding bulk to the garment's main body. This was essential for nuns engaged in various manual labors, from gardening to tending to the infirm or illuminating manuscripts. The fit of the under-tunic was rarely tailored. Instead, it was designed to be loose and comfortable, allowing for layers beneath it, such as the chemise, and for airflow, which was important in times before modern ventilation. This loose fit also meant that the same garment could accommodate slight changes in a nun's body over time, further extending its lifespan. The rules governing the under-tunic varied between different monastic orders. The Benedictine rule, for example, emphasized sufficiency rather than luxury, stating that monks and nuns should have garments suitable for the climate and region. This meant that while the basic form remained consistent, the weight and material might differ significantly from a convent in sunny Italy to one in chilly England. Some orders might specify the number of under-tunics a nun was permitted to own, often limiting it to 1 or 2 serviceable garments. This scarcity meant that repair and maintenance were paramount. Patches were common, and a garment would be mended and remended until it was threadbare and could no longer serve its purpose. The life of an under-tunic was often as long as the life of the nun herself, or it would be passed down to novices, a practice that underscored the vows of poverty and continuity within the community. The color of the under-tunic was almost universally undyed or subdued. Bright colors were associated with vanity and worldly attachment, which were antithetical to monastic vows. Natural linen colors, ranging from beige to gray, or the undyed browns and off-whites of wool, were standard. These colors also had practical advantages. They showed dirt less readily than stark white and required no costly dyeing processes. The visual simplicity of the under-tunic reinforced the ascetic lifestyle and the rejection of worldly adornment. It was a garment that spoke of practicality, humility, and endurance, a quiet foundation beneath the more public presentation of the habit. The durability of these garments was critical. They were worn daily, through all activities, providing the main clothing layer beneath the more formal and symbolically important habit. A nun might spend her entire day in this under-tunic during periods of intense manual labor or during the hottest summer months, stripping off the outer habit for greater comfort while still maintaining modesty. The laundering of under-tunics, like other medieval garments, was not a frequent occurrence. Communal wash days were arduous events, often involving boiling water, lye, or ash for soap, and significant physical effort. Such events might take place only a few times a year, or perhaps monthly in wealthier houses. This meant that the under-tunic, being a direct body layer, would accumulate sweat, dirt, and odors over time. This reality stands in stark contrast to modern hygiene standards. The garments were designed to be resilient to this infrequent washing, relying on the natural properties of linen and wool to shed dirt or to minimize its visual impact. The simple cut also made them easier to clean and dry. After washing, garments were typically laid out to dry in the sun or by a fire, a process that could take days depending on the weather and the thickness of the fabric. The under-tunic sometimes served as a canvas for quiet devotion, while unadorned for public view. Some surviving examples of monastic textiles show simple embroidered marks or small cross stitches on the inside seams or hems, perhaps a private sign of the nun who made or wore it. These were not for display, but perhaps for personal prayer or identification. This garment represented the first layer of self-denial and humility worn by a nun. A simple garment for a life dedicated to God, a testament to the practicalities of a daily existence lived in devotion and labor. Number 6. The simple scapular. The scapular, an iconic piece of monastic attire, might seem to be an outer garment, but a simpler, more workaday version often functioned as a practical underlayer or an immediate overlayer to the undertunic preceding the full habit. The simpler scapular, distinct from the more formal or ceremonial one worn over the outer habit for liturgical duties, served as a protective apron, guarding the more costly undertunic from the daily wear and tear of manual labor. It consisted of a long, narrow strip of cloth, with an opening for the head, falling both front and back. Its name derives from the Latin scapulae, meaning shoulders, as it literally rested upon the shoulders and extended down the body. The materials for this simple scapular were typically robust and inexpensive, such as coarse linen, hemp, or undyed wool. These materials were chosen for their durability and ease of cleaning, given the garment's exposure to dirt, dust, and the various substances encountered during daily tasks within the convent. Unlike the symbolically rich and sometimes decorated outer scapulars, these inner or work scapulars were utterly plain. They might be made from leftover pieces of cloth or from textiles woven specifically for utilitarian purposes within the convent's own workshops. Color was almost always the natural hue of the fiber, such as off-white, gray, or natural brown, colors that absorbed stains less noticeably and did not require expensive dyes. The design of the simple scapular was straightforward. It was usually rectangular, with simple slits for the head and sometimes for the arms, allowing it to be slipped on easily over the under-tunic. The length varied, but it generally extended to the knees or ankles, providing substantial coverage for the undergarments. The width was typically modest, often mirroring the width of the shoulders or slightly wider, ensuring that it was not bulky and did not impede movement. This practical garment was worn during tasks that might soil or damage the under-tunic or the main habit. Activities such as cooking in the kitchen, working in the garden, cleaning the monastic buildings, or engaging in crafts like pottery or weaving would necessitate the use of this protective layer. It acted as a shield, bearing the brunt of spills, dirt, and friction, preserving the longevity of the garments beneath. The simple scapular also served as a layer of warmth, especially during colder months. The addition of another layer of fabric, even a thin one, contributed to the overall thermal insulation, a crucial consideration in drafty medieval buildings with limited heating. It was a utilitarian garment that spoke to the industrious nature of monastic life and the constant engagement with manual labor. For nuns, the scapular, even in its simplest form, carried a symbolic resonance connecting them to the long tradition of monasticism and the dedication to work as a form of prayer. While not as overtly symbolic as the ceremonial scapular, its constant presence during daily tasks reinforced the commitment to both spiritual and physical labor. Monastic rules from the period specify that nuns should be suitably dressed for all tasks. The simple scapular allowed for protection without necessitating a complete change of habit. It could be easily removed or donned as tasks changed throughout the day, providing flexibility in a life structured by strict schedules. Accounts from various convents indicate that nuns would often have a designated set of working clothes, and the simple scapular was a core component of this set. These working garments would be subjected to far greater wear and tear than their more formal counterparts. Thus, the simple scapular was frequently patched, repaired, and mended. The act of mending these garments was itself a part of the monastic discipline, fostering humility and resourcefulness. Scraps of fabric would be saved and repurposed, and nothing was wasted. The cleaning of the simple scapular would have been more frequent than the under-tunic, as its purpose was to accumulate dirt. However frequent in medieval terms, still did not mean daily. Washing would occur when the garment became noticeably soiled, perhaps weekly or bi-weekly, depending on the level of activity and the order's specific practices. The resilience of the chosen fabrics, such as coarse linen or hemp, meant they could withstand repeated scrubbing with lye or ash and vigorous beating, which were common medieval laundry methods. After washing, the scapulars would be laid out to dry, often in the sun, where the light could help with bleaching and sanitization. The sun also helped to minimize the lingering odors that were an inevitable part of textile life in an era without modern detergents. The simplicity of the garment also meant that it was easily reproducible. If one became too worn, another could be quickly made from available cloth. This accessibility ensured that nuns always had appropriate protective wear for their duties. The simple scapular, while not a garment of public display, was a silent workhorse of the monastic wardrobe. It represented the hidden labor, the practical dedication, and the unassuming humility that characterized the daily lives of medieval nuns. It was a testament to a life lived in service, both spiritual and physical, a constant reminder that even the humblest tasks were imbued with divine purpose. Its presence beneath or immediately over the under-tunic allowed the nun to perform her duties while preserving the dignity and cleanliness of her more formal habit, embodying the quiet fortitude of cloistered life. Number 5. The wimple and gorget base. The wimple, a prominent feature of the medieval nun's habit, covered the neck and chin, often extending up to the ears, creating a distinctive framed appearance for the face. While the wimple itself was a visible element of the habit, its foundation and the methods used to secure it comprised a hidden, intricate system of fabrics and pins that ensured its precise and modest presentation. This underlying structure, sometimes incorporating a gorget or throat cloth, was crucial for maintaining the wimple's shape and preventing it from shifting. A testament to the meticulous standards of modesty and neatness within monastic orders, the wimple's base often consisted of several layers of finely woven linen, applied directly over the fillet or linen cap. The primary material for the wimple and its foundational layers was usually white linen. This choice was deliberate. White linen symbolized purity and chastity, virtues central to the monastic life. It was also a practical choice. Linen could be washed and bleached to maintain its pristine appearance, and its fine weave allowed for delicate folds and drapes without excessive bulk. Quality of the linen could vary, but for the wimple, often a finer grade was preferred, as it was in direct contact with the skin and visible to some extent. The gorget, a separate piece of cloth that might be worn to cover the neck and chest beneath the wimple, was also typically made of linen. This gorget would often be tucked into the neckline of the habit or pinned to the underlying layers. The process of donning the wimple and its base was a meticulous ritual. After the hair was secured under a fillet or cap, the wimple base or gorget was carefully positioned. This might involve a strip of linen wrapped around the neck and fastened at the back, or a large square of linen folded diagonally and pinned to create the desired contour around the face. Small, sharp pins, typically made of bone or brass, were indispensable tools in this process. These pins were used to secure the various folds and layers of linen, holding them firmly in place for hours, sometimes an entire day, through prayer, work, and sleep. The number and placement of these pins were not arbitrary. They followed established customs within each convent, ensuring a uniform and secure presentation. The wimple served multiple purposes beyond modesty. It symbolized the nun's withdrawal from the world, her spiritual marriage to Christ, and her renunciation of vanity. By obscuring the neck, chin, and often the hair, it removed markers of worldly beauty and emphasized spiritual devotion. The strictness of its application reflected the discipline inherent in monastic life. A wimple that was loose, askew, or poorly pinned would be considered disorderly and a sign of a lack of adherence to the community's standards. Tension created by the tightly pinned wimple and its underlying layers could sometimes be uncomfortable, particularly during long hours of wear, and might even restrict movement of the head. This discomfort was often accepted as a minor penance, a physical reminder of the spiritual commitments. The daily routine of dressing involved careful manipulation of these linen layers. The wimple and gorget base were not simple garments to slip on. They required precision, often with the assistance of another nun or a mirror. The folds had to be smooth, the edges crisp, and the overall effect one of serene containment. The wimple often passed under the chin and wrapped around the face, sometimes being pinned to the top of the head or directly to the fillet. The outer layers of the wimple would then be draped and secured, with the main veil worn over it. This layering created a structure that supported the veil and ensured it stayed in place even during vigorous activities or while bowing during prayer. Monastic chronicles and iconography from the period depict nuns with consistently neat and tightly bound head coverings, underscoring the importance of this aspect of their appearance. The details of wimple construction are not always explicitly stated in monastic rules, but they are implied through the expectation of modesty and decorum. The meticulous care involved in preparing and wearing the wimple and its base reflected the nuns' dedication to their vows and their communal identity. It was a uniform that, even in its subtle underlying structures, communicated adherence to a strict way of life. The material itself, linen, was known for its stiffening properties when starched, and some wimples might have been lightly starched to maintain their crispness and shape, though explicit mention of this in monastic texts is rare. Cleaning of these white linen components was a constant chore. White linen showed dirt and grime readily. Nuns would regularly wash and bleach their wimples, often with lye and sun-drying to maintain their pure white appearance. The pins used to secure them were also precious items. Metal pins, particularly brass, were more expensive and durable than bone pins, and their loss would be a minor inconvenience. The care and maintenance of these small utilitarian items also fell under the purview of monastic discipline and resourcefulness. The wimple, even with its unseen structural base, was thus not merely a piece of cloth, but a fundamental component of the nun's visual identity and a daily testament to her commitment to the enclosed life and its disciplines. It framed her face, but also, in its rigid structure, framed her life within the boundaries of her spiritual vows, a silent yet powerful statement of her chosen path. Number 4. The fillet, or linen cap. The fillet, often a simple band or full cap made of linen, served as the most fundamental head covering for a medieval nun, worn directly against the scalp to contain the hair. It was the very first layer of headwear applied before the wimple, gorget, and veil. This unassuming garment played a crucial role in maintaining modesty, hygiene, and the overall structure of the complex monastic headwear. Purpose was to keep the hair completely covered and secure, as showing hair was considered immodest for women in medieval society, especially for nuns who had vowed perpetual enclosure and detachment from worldly vanity. The material for the fillet was almost exclusively white linen. This fabric was chosen for its breathability, softness against the skin, and its ability to absorb sweat and oils from the hair, thereby keeping the outer, more visible headwear cleaner. Linen was also durable and could withstand frequent washing and bleaching, which was necessary to maintain hygiene. The weave could vary from a fine, soft linen for comfort to a coarser, more open weave for breathability, depending on the specific monastic order's regulations and the availability of resources. The natural white color of bleached linen also carried symbolic significance, representing purity and innocence, qualities central to the nun's vows. The design of the fillet was straightforward. It could be a simple broad band of linen wrapped around the head to keep the hair compressed, or a full cap designed to completely enclose the hair, often gathered into a bun or braids at the back of the head. For some nuns, particularly those with long hair, the cap provided a more secure and comfortable way to manage the hair throughout the day and night. The edges of the fillet were usually simply hemmed, without elaborate decoration, aligning with the monastic emphasis on simplicity and austerity. The fillet was tied or pinned securely in place, often with a simple knot or small unobtrusive pins, to prevent it from shifting during daily activities, including physical labor and prostrations during prayer. The wearing of the fillet was a mandatory practice for all nuns, from their initial entry into the novitiate until their death. It signified their commitment to the monastic life and their renunciation of worldly adornment. Concealment of hair was a powerful symbol of humility and the rejection of personal beauty. For medieval women, hair was often seen as a sign of beauty and femininity, and its complete covering for nuns was a public declaration of their spiritual dedication and their separation from secular society. The fillet, though unseen, was the very foundation of this symbolic act. The daily routine for a nun began with the careful containment of her hair under the fillet. This ensured that no stray strands would escape from beneath the subsequent layers of headwear, which would be considered disorderly and a breach of decorum. The snug fit of the fillet also contributed to the overall stability of the wimple and veil, preventing them from slipping or needing constant adjustment. This practical function was as important as its symbolic one. In some convents, the fillet might even be worn during sleep, emphasizing the continuous nature of monastic discipline and the constant state of readiness for prayer. This was particularly true in orders that required waking for nocturnal prayers, meaning minimal time for dressing and undressing. Historical monastic texts and customs often detail the strictness with which nuns were expected to manage their hair. For example, some orders explicitly forbade nuns from cutting their hair, while others allowed for it to be trimmed for practicality or hygiene. Regardless of the length, the hair was always to be completely covered by the fillet. This consistency across different orders underscored the universal importance of modesty and the effacement of individual vanity within the monastic tradition. Archaeological textile finds from monastic sites have occasionally yielded fragments of simple linen caps and bands, offering tangible evidence of these fundamental head coverings. Cleanliness of the fillet was paramount, as it was in direct contact with the skin and hair. While full laundry days were infrequent, it is likely that fillets were among the items that received more regular spot cleaning or rinsing, given their function in absorbing sweat and oil. The ability of linen to be boiled and bleached without significant degradation made it an ideal material for hygiene. Continuous wear, however, would inevitably lead to some discoloration and wear and tear. Fillets, like other monastic garments, would be mended and patched until they were no longer serviceable, embodying the monastic ideals of poverty and resourcefulness. The creation of these fillets was often part of the communal labor of the nuns, reflecting their self-sufficiency and dedication to craftsmanship even for the simplest of garments. The fillet, hidden beneath layers of more prominent headwear, was a quiet, constant testament to the nuns' commitment to humility, purity, and a life lived entirely for God. It was a foundational piece in a complex system of self-presentation that spoke volumes about her chosen path. Number 3. The inner veil. Beneath the formal, visible veil of a medieval nun often lay a simpler, lighter inner veil. This garment, sometimes called a coif or a basic headcloth, served as an essential intermediary layer, positioned directly over the fillet or linen cap and supporting the heavier outer veil. Its primary functions were practical: to provide an additional layer of modesty, to absorb perspiration and oils from the hair and scalp, and to create a smooth surface for the main veil to rest upon, ensuring it draped correctly and remained securely in place. While less ceremonious than the outer veil, this inner layer was indispensable to the nun's daily attire and adherence to strict monastic rules. The inner veil was predominantly made from fine white linen. Choice of linen was consistent with other undergarments and headwear prized for its breathability, absorbency, and its ability to be washed and bleached to maintain a pristine appearance. The white color held deep symbolic meaning, representing purity, innocence, and a spiritual marriage to Christ. The fineness of the weave for the inner veil was often superior to that of a basic chemise, given its proximity to the face and its role in creating a smooth profile. Fabric was typically unadorned, reflecting the ascetic ideals of monastic life. No embroidery or decoration would be found on this inner layer. The design of the inner veil was simple and functional. It was typically a rectangular or square piece of cloth, folded and draped over the head to cover the fillet, and extend down to the shoulders or chest. It might be secured by tying simple knots under the chin, or by small discreet pins to the fillet or wimple base. The inner veil created a soft, absorbent layer against the skin and provided a consistent foundation for the subsequent layers of headwear. It also offered an additional barrier against cold in drafty monastic buildings, contributing to the overall warmth of the nun's attire. Its looseness allowed for air circulation, which was important in warmer weather or during physical exertion, preventing excessive discomfort from the multiple layers of cloth on the head. The wearing of the inner veil was a universal practice across most monastic orders, reinforcing the commitment to modesty and the complete concealment of hair and neck. Even within the cloister, where interactions with the outside world were minimal, the nuns maintained strict standards of dress. The inner veil ensured that, even if the outer veil shifted or was temporarily removed for certain tasks, the nun's head and hair remained modestly covered. This constant state of spiritual readiness and observance of decorum was central to the monastic way of life. The inner veil, while often unseen, was a quiet testament to the nun's unwavering dedication to her vows. The process of donning the inner veil was part of the intricate morning ritual of dressing. After securing the fillet and positioning the wimple base, the inner veil would be carefully draped and adjusted. This layered approach to headwear ensured maximum stability and prevented any part of the hair or neck from being inadvertently exposed. The inner veil also served to absorb any moisture or oil from the scalp, protecting the more visible and potentially more valuable outer veil from frequent soiling. This practical function prolonged the life of the outer veil, reducing the need for constant cleaning and maintenance. Monastic texts from the medieval period, while not always explicitly detailing every undergarment, consistently emphasize the importance of modesty and the full covering of the head for nuns. The inner veil played a vital role in achieving this ideal. It was a garment of constant wear, often worn throughout the day and night in some stricter orders, particularly for those who slept in communal dormitories and observed vigils that required waking for prayer throughout the night. Continuous wear meant that the inner veil had to be comfortable and durable. The cleaning of the inner veil was a regular task, perhaps more frequent than for other undergarments, given its direct contact with the head and its role in absorbing sweat and oils. Like other linen garments, it would be washed with lye or ash and then bleached in the sun to maintain its white color and hygienic state. The repetitive process of washing, drying, and redonning these layers was a constant part of the nun's life, reflecting the practical realities of medieval existence alongside her spiritual disciplines. The simple construction of the inner veil meant that it was easily made and repaired by the nuns themselves, often from communal stores of linen, further emphasizing self-sufficiency and the rejection of worldly goods. It was a humble yet indispensable part of the nun's habit, quietly supporting her spiritual commitment through its practical and symbolic functions. Number 2. The hose, or stockings. Beneath the long, flowing robes of a medieval nun, hidden from public view were her hose or stockings. These essential leg coverings provided warmth, modesty, and a degree of comfort in the often cold and damp monastic environments. Unlike modern hosiery, medieval hosea were not knitted in the complex, seamless tubes we know today. Instead, they were typically cut from woven fabric, usually wool or linen, and sewn together, often with a seam running up the back of the leg. Their function was purely practical, offering necessary protection and insulation for the legs, which were otherwise covered only by the layers of tunics and habits. The materials used for a nun's hose were dictated by practicality and the monastic vows of poverty. Wool was a common choice, particularly in colder regions, and for winter wear due to its excellent insulating properties. The wool would often be undyed, presenting in the natural colors of sheep such as off-white, gray, or various shades of brown. This aligns with the monastic emphasis on plainness and the rejection of worldly dyes. Linen was also used, especially in warmer climates or for summer wear, prized for its breathability and absorbency. Regardless of the material, the fabric was likely coarse and durable, designed to withstand daily wear and tear. The construction of medieval hose was a skilled task. They were cut on the bias, meaning diagonally, to the weave of the fabric, to allow for a degree of stretch and fit around the leg. Each leg was typically a separate piece, shaped to fit from the foot up to the thigh, or just above the knee. The foot portion was often shaped like a simple sock with a seam running down the sole or across the toes. The upper part of the hose was designed to be held up by garters or ties, usually made from strips of fabric tied just above or below the knee, or even to the waist of the under-tunic or braise which were similar to short breeches worn by men and sometimes by women for warmth. This method of securing meant that the hose might sometimes sag or wrinkle, but it was the most common solution before the invention of elastic. The purpose of hose was primarily functional. They offered protection against the elements, shielding the legs from cold drafts and minor abrasions during daily activities. In the unheated or minimally heated stone buildings of a medieval convent, warmth was a constant concern, and layers of clothing were crucial for survival and comfort. For nuns engaged in manual labor, such as working in the scriptorium, gardens, or kitchens, hose also provided a barrier against dirt and physical discomfort. The long, loose habit would cover them, but the hose ensured the legs themselves were properly clad. The monastic rules, while often detailing the appearance of the outer habit, generally allowed for practical undergarments that ensured modesty and comfort. The ownership of hose would be limited perhaps to 1 or 2 pairs, reflecting the vow of poverty. This meant that the hose, like other garments, would be carefully mended and patched whenever they showed signs of wear. The visible repairs would not be a source of shame, but rather a testament to the nun's humility and resourcefulness. The act of patching and mending was often a communal activity, reflecting the shared life and responsibilities within the convent. Cleaning of hose, similar to other undergarments, was not a daily routine. Communal laundry days were infrequent, meaning that the hose would accumulate dirt, sweat, and odors over extended periods. Wool, in particular, would absorb moisture and odors, though its natural lanolin provided some resistance to dirt. Linen, while more breathable, would also retain signs of wear. The process of washing involved laborious scrubbing, beating, and rinsing, followed by lengthy drying. The durability of the materials was paramount for garments that were subject to such infrequent but intense cleaning processes. Accounts from the period, including wills and inventories of monastic possessions, sometimes list hose among the personal belongings of nuns, providing tangible evidence of their existence and practical necessity. While not a garment of symbolic importance like the veil or scapular, the hose were a fundamental part of the nun's daily attire, enabling her to perform her duties with greater comfort and protection. They represent the quiet, often unacknowledged realities of life within the cloister, where practical considerations for warmth and modesty were as essential as spiritual devotion. The hidden presence of these humble leg coverings guessed the comprehensive nature of monastic dress, designed not for display, but for a life of purpose, labor, and prayer, lived fully within the medieval world. Number 1. The chemise or shifet. The chemise, or shift, was the absolute innermost garment worn by a medieval nun, making it the very first layer of cloth to touch her skin each morning. This foundational undergarment was the equivalent of a modern slip or undershirt, but its purpose was far more extensive in the context of medieval life and monastic vows. It served as the primary barrier between the nun's body and the coarser, often scratchier, outer layers of her habit. The chemise also played a crucial role in hygiene, absorbing sweat and body oils, thereby protecting the more substantial and less frequently washed garments from direct soiling. Most commonly, medieval chemises were crafted from linen, a natural fiber derived from the flax plant. Linen was highly valued for its breathability, absorbency, and its ability to be washed and dried relatively quickly, even if washing itself was infrequent. For nuns particularly, those in orders observing strict vows of poverty, the linen used would have been coarse, unbleached, and often homespun within the monastic community itself. Records from various convents sometimes detailed the communal efforts of nuns in spinning and weaving flax during their designated work periods, highlighting the self-sufficiency and communal labor involved in producing their own garments. In some regions, or for winter wear, a very fine, soft wool might have been used for warmth, though linen was overwhelmingly preferred for its comfort against the skin and ease of cleaning. Cut of the chemise was universally simple and practical. It was a long, loose-fitting garment, often reaching the ankles, with long, loose sleeves that extended to the wrists. The neckline was modest, typically a simple rounded opening or a slit, designed to provide full coverage without restricting movement. The garment was cut from straight pieces of fabric, often using the full width of the loom to minimize waste of precious cloth. Triangular gussets were often inserted under the arms to allow for greater freedom of movement without tearing the fabric, an essential feature for a garment worn during daily chores and prayer. The seams were sturdy but plain, sewn with simple running or back stitches. The very nature of the chemise meant it was designed for endurance. A nun might possess only a few chemises throughout her entire monastic life, or perhaps just one or two at any given time, according to the stipulations of her order. This scarcity meant that every garment was cherished, repaired, and mended until it could no longer hold together. Patches were a common sight, and the life of a chemise was long and hard, mirroring the life of its wearer. The vow of poverty meant that new garments were a rarity, and the mending of old ones was a daily reality. The washing of chemises was not a daily affair, nor even a weekly one by modern standards. Communal laundry days in medieval monasteries were arduous events, occurring only a few times a year, or perhaps monthly, in wealthier establishments. This meant that the chemise, being the layer closest to the body, would accumulate dirt, sweat, and odors over extended periods. The linen, while absorbent, would retain these signs of wear. This reality stands in stark contrast to modern hygiene practices, but was a fundamental part of medieval daily life, even within the confines of a religious community. The garments were designed to be resilient to this infrequent washing, relying on the natural properties of linen to wick away moisture and its ability to withstand vigorous scrubbing with lye or ash, the primary cleaning agents of the time. Beyond its practical functions, the chemise held a quiet, symbolic significance. It represented the purity and humility of the nun, her dedication to a life of service and detachment from worldly desires. The unadorned, simple nature of the garment reflected the inner state of simplicity and poverty that was sought through monastic discipline. It was the first layer of self-denial and modesty, worn even in the privacy of her cell, a constant unseen reminder of her vows. Accounts from monastic life occasionally touch upon the practicalities of dressing and the limited personal possessions. The chemise was a ubiquitous garment, worn by all social classes in medieval society as an undergarment, but for the nun it took on an additional layer of spiritual meaning through its plainness and constant presence. This humble piece of linen, worn closest to the skin, was a testament to the quiet fortitude and unwavering devotion of the medieval nun, embodying the unseen realities of a life dedicated to God.